This next speaker is a dear friend of mine, and I'm very honored to introduce her to you all today. Heather Estus is the founder of the Worthiness Formula, Worthy University, and the Worthy Ranch. They're also one of our nonprofit partners today. Heather aims to cure the unworthiness disease by helping individuals unlock their innate worth, identify their core values, and build supportive communities. As a mother of 5 and the eldest of 11 siblings, she's honed her leadership skills, resilience, and ability to foster meaningful connections throughout her life. So let's welcome Heather Estus to the stage.
Everybody's so beautiful today and dressed up. And I already told the story to a couple of you, but like dressing up is a big deal for me. And of course, everybody knows I'm like a walking Switch Society commercial. So I'm gonna do my little plug, and I'm not getting paid for that. However, this morning when I got ready, I always ask Chris, who is my design consultant, my fiance, Chris, most of you know him. I walk in and I said, okay, how's it fit? He looks me up and down. You look like you work at a fancy hospital. I was like, that's it, that's what I'm going for. So, raise up to all the nurses in the house. Do we have any nurses? I know we have some nurses in the house, yeah? Raise up to all the nurses. This is the fancy outfit that you can get at Switch Society. Yep, it'll be there in a couple of weeks, probably. So, because it's a storytelling conference, I'm going to keep this pretty casual. I'm going to tell you some stories. How's that sound? And also, is everybody like, let's do a bra check. Is this a bed except for the males? I mean, I get it. So is this so far like you're feeling like I put a bra on for this? Or is it like I put a bra on for this? Yeah. Because that's how I was feeling. This morning I was like, oh, I gotta go home and put a bra on real quick. All of you know that I showed up and I was like, oh shit, I don't have a bra. I gotta go back home and change. So yes, I'm glad I feel the same way. So I'm gonna start with a story of when I was a kid. And you know, like we don't really remember things when we're little, but there's these certain memories that stick out, and those are the ones that like shape you and formed you. So I was in this apartment in California, and California's like kind of muggy, you know, in the evenings, and my dad was sitting in the chair like this, and he had a cigarette in one hand and a beer can in the other. And they had this big party earlier, and everybody had drank and had some fun, and they had played that new record that you just heard, Bob Marley, Three Little Birds, came out in 1976, I think it was. And so I remembered that. But I knew what he was doing because my mom wasn't home from work yet, and she was a waitress. He was waiting for her to get home from work, and it was getting late. My little brother was sitting there playing with that, you know, that thing that you stuff the shapes in, that little triangle game or whatever they used to have. Yeah, super cool. And I hear the keys in the door. My mom's coming in, and before she can even open the door, my dad throws the beer can right at her and starts yelling, screaming, accusing, all of the things. Things are flying all over the place. And all I can think about is my little brother is like totally clueless in the middle of the thing, like just hanging out, saggy diaper and all. And I I crawl on all fours. I pick him up like a football and take him back behind the couch. And I'm sitting there, and it's just the screaming and the yelling, all the things, and I'm terrified. And I'm not terrified for myself. And then my brother starts crying. I'm like, oh God, please stop crying because you're going to draw attention to us. And he wasn't crying because he was scared. He was crying because he left a damn toy in the middle of the floor, right? So, shh, quiet. And so I hold him, and then I just felt this like calmness. Like I couldn't hear anything. And that like spiritual like calmness came over me, and I felt, oh, I'm getting goosebumps right now. And this hug, this warm hug, and whispered, don't worry, everything's gonna be all right. And then I started hugging my brother and rocking him and singing the song, don't worry about a thing, cause every little thing's gonna be all right. And it was. Things got better, and I grew up, and I stuffed it all, like we do, we stuffed it all behind us, and I was like, I went the achiever route, so I was like, straight A student council, sports, all the things that I could sign up to distract myself from any of the trauma that I experienced. And in that process, I got a full ride scholarship to journalism school, which was super cool because I loved hearing people's stories, and I loved telling stories, and basketball. So I was like, yes, nothing can stop me now, except 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, right? I just started and already sabotaged myself. I got pregnant my first year in college at ASU, and I lost my scholarship, boyfriend disappeared, and my dad disowned me, right? How many of you had moments like that where you have everything and all of a sudden it's gone, right? And I was like, what am I gonna do now? I come home from the hospital, I have Tristan, my daughter, my newborn daughter in my arms. I walk up to the apartment door, there's a pink sheet on the door, what do you think it said? Eviction notice, right? Boyfriend took off, left me with everything and nothing, of course. And I'm trying to figure out, I don't even know how I'm gonna feed myself, let alone my daughter. And what are we gonna do? And then that song and that warmness came upon me that night again. And I just held my daughter and I sang to her, don't worry about a thing. And it was, and it got better. Everything works out, right? A few years down the line, I started looking for a different kind of truth. I had discovered that, when you're little and you look at your parents, you're like, look at their hands and you look at their feet to see if they match. Right? You're like, are they really my parents? So my mom had told me that my dad that raised me, the one that was abusive with her, and took us away from her, wasn't really my dad. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's not true, right? But come to find out, she was right. And I wanted to put this story to bed. And so I had my husband at the time look this name up, Richard Villa, who there's 100 of them in Phoenix, right? And I ended up finding my real dad in that process. And when I was little, side note, I grew up in the suburbs of Chandler, Arizona. Does anybody know where Chandler, Arizona is, right? But all of my friends lived in the country. They all were in 4-H, they all did horse stuff, and so I would leave every weekend and go hang out with my friends in the country. And I'd come home, and my dad, my stepdad, would be like, I always want to hang out with those country folk. I'm like, I don't know, I just like it. I love it. Well, fast forward, I find my real dad, and I pull up to the house, the whole family is there, and I'm like, holy, I thought it was going to be this intimate moment where we get to meet. Nope, that whole family was there. And I find out that my dad is a rancher and a healer, a cowboy, an old vaquero. And I just oh, I get it now. And so my dad didn't talk much. He was the old Mexican cowboy that did long mustaches. And all of our family was like, who is this girl? Comes out of nowhere and claims that, that's her dad, blah, blah. So he's like, we're not gonna worry about them. He takes me on this test of his own, it's a cowboy test. He throws me on the back of a horse, right, in the arena, and I'm riding the horse. He helped me tack, I didn't know anything. I mean, I maybe rode a horse twice. Helped me tack the horse, I'm riding the arena, and then he's like, oh, Mija, you go out and ride it outside. Okay, so he opens the gate, and I go ride the horse, and then the horse wants to come back. What do horses do when they want to go back home, right? So it takes off, and I'm trying to slow down, and then we get in the arena, and the horse thinks it's time to be done. So, yeah, my dad's standing there in the corner, like chewing his tobacco, like watching, and he shuts the gate, and I keep riding. The horse starts bucking, right, trying to buck me off because he's done. And I just hold on, and I ride it through. And finally he stops, right? So then I'm looking at my dad, like, he's over there, he's like nothing. Walking over there, and he comes over there, starts to help me untack the horse. You know, mija, we don't need any blood tests. You're definitely my daughter. And I was like, right? That's those moments when you like exhale. Like I was like, I found my people too. Like like Becky's saying, I was finding the people, and I understood now why I had this attraction and this like innate ability to be around horses and to be at ranch and all of the things. And that's why I'm here in Montana. Most of you know the Worthy Ranch, because I have that vision. But those stories really defined who I was and kept on moving. But one thing that was consistent in all of that was that voice, right? That innate spirit, the Holy Spirit, intuition, whatever you want to call it, was always there and guiding me. I didn't always listen to it, right? We don't always listen to our intuition, and that's usually when we get in trouble. And along with spirit has a sidekick. Who knows what spirit's sidekick is? Anybody? Ego. Ego is spirit's sidekick. And she gets and they get a very bad rap, right? Ego's like, ooh, the ego. But the reality is, we cannot work without ego. Spirit leads, but ego's a sidekick. It helps. Think of ego as the meat suit, right? That's the meat suit, the ego, because spirit comes and allows us to experience life. And without the meat suit, right, without the flesh, we don't have that. But what does the flesh want, right? This is where we get to the ego, gets a bad rap. The flesh wants all of the things, right, and experiencing all of the things. And we wouldn't be able to have that, like the good and the bad and all of those things. So I'm going to tell you a story about how I continued to build and work with survivors, also the people that I coached, the women that I coached. All of those things helped me to continue to lean into my intuition. About, 3 months ago, here's the next story. I heard this story from somebody else, or I read it, and it was about Nishadam Afa, which was Navajo for Spider Grandma. And who knows a story about Spider Grandma? Anybody in here? Okay. So Spider Grandma was a spider grandma amongst the animal kingdom. And this is when it was all dark. There was no light. And all the animals were trying to figure out, how do we bring light to the darkness? And so animals tried. They had the bravest of the eagles, the buzzards, the possums. All of the animals tried to go and get the fire, but nobody could get it. In fact, they say the punishment was that their tails burned. Think of a possum, no hair on the tail. Buzzards, they're bald, right? Those were their punishments for trying to get the fire. So Spider Grandma throws her hat in the ring. And she comes up, she was like, I think I can help. And so they're like, are you kidding me, Spider Grandma? You're like this big and you're like 95 years old. You're not going to do nothing, right? So they're all mocking her. She's like, no, just trust me. So Spider Grandma weaves a pot and she puts it on her back and she travels for days and days and days into the mountains and over the oceans, through the rivers, to grandmother's house. So she finally sees this like bright light in the sky, and so she gravitates, and then she gets a little closer, and she sees the people are all having parties, and they're like dancing around the fire and having a great time. She's like, oh, this is the fire I need to bring back. This is the light. It has so much fun and life to it. So Spider Grandma waits for the party to slow down, then she reaches over, crawls over, grabs a little bit of fire, throws it in the pot, and crawls back. And she gets back, all the animals are shocked, right? But they don't really know what it is. She takes it out and she throws it up in the sky. And what do you think that is? Right? The sun. So Spider Grandma saved the day. That's the story I had, and I had heard, and I was like, wow, this is a cool story. And here's another fun fact. Spider-Man, that we all know, guess where Spider-Man came from? Spider Grandma, Spider Woman. no shock, right, that the superhero was a woman first and then they changed it to Spider-Man, right? Yeah, okay. Now we gotta keep talking about Spider. All the parents in here gotta tell your kids the Spider Grandma story, right? It changes their idea about spiders too. And here's the next story. I was on an artist date. Does anybody know what an artist date is? Right? That's Julia Cameron. She wrote this book about when you're an artist, you go out, take yourself out, and have an artist date. You inspire yourself. So I'm gonna go to this whiskey bar in Las Vegas, and I'm gonna go watch the new. It was one of the singers that just made a movie and have a nice evening. While I'm sitting at the bar, some of you know this, I like to draw on my iPad and do digital art. So I'm drawing the whiskey bar, sitting there, and the bartender is talking. He's like, the manager's like, oh, you're drawing? I was like, yeah. I was like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go watch this movie. And they're like, oh, okay, come back and see us. We got specials after 9 o'clock. I'm like, okay. So I go to the movie. It's the Bob Dylan movie. Had anybody seen that? That's a really good movie, right? Very inspiring. So I'm sitting in the middle of the Bob Dylan movie, and all of a sudden my intuition is like, I'm like, damn it, I'm trying to watch the movie. You need to tell the bartender about Spider Grandma. I was like, what? Okay. Can I watch the movie now? Okay. I'll tell him. I'll go back, because I wasn't really sure if I was going to go back, but I did have to finish drawing. So I was like, I'll go back and talk to the bartender. So I go back to now this bartender's sort of like, this lady's weird, right? Like, I come back and I'm like, so, I was sitting in the movie and I had this, feeling that I needed to share the story with you. And he's like, okay, He's like, is it something I can retell to other people? I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. He's like, what's it about? And I said, it's about Spider Grandma. And his eyes went, he's like, okay. And he looked terrified. So I tell him the story of Spider Grandma. And as I'm talking to him, he starts to exhale. He starts to breathe. And then by the end of the story, he was like, oh my God, how did you know? And I'm like, know what? How did you know that I was terrified of spiders? And I was like, what? I didn't know. I told you, my intuition said, tell the story to the bartender. He's like, when I was a little boy, I was about 3 years old, and a black widow crawled into my bed and bit me right in the middle of my stomach. I still have a gigantic hole in my stomach from that because I had to be rushed to the hospital, all the things. And he's like, I was terrified of spiders since then. And then, to make it worse, my brother tied me up and put me in front of the television and made me watch Arachnophobia. He's like, so then it was even worse. Yeah. Love them brothers, right? He's like, and ever since I have been terrified. Like, you have no idea. It has actually cost me relationships. Because I'm supposed to be a man, and I'm supposed to be strong, and squish the spider, and go get the spider. And he's like, but I've been terrified. He's like, and for the first time, I actually feel like I can breathe, and I'm not afraid. He's like, I love Spider Grandma. So all that to say is, Spirit leads, right? Ego's the sidekick, helps us experience all of that. But because we're in a world, and times are crazy, and I get all that, but we're in this world where we have focused so much on the body and the mind, right? We learn. We go to education, we get to school, we go to universities, get degrees, and we work on this body. We gotta have the body, right? Gotta make sure we're fit, how we look, right? And how much we know, how much we've learned. Those are all things that have created status for us. But we've forgotten the other part, which is the most important part, which is what? Spirit, right? Mind, body, and spirit. Spirit leads, right? So you're going to notice, you already do probably, how this world is changing. And if you notice, you'll see how neuroscience is coming together, right, with the woo-woo, and this world's starting to change, and there's people that are scientists that are studying about the spirit and what we can do with the power of the spirit. We all have telepathy. I know you all probably know that, right? We all have these awesome superpowers like Spider Grandma that we're just beginning to tap into. And spirit, that intuition, that guide, is the one thing that leads us and helps us grow, right? Whenever we have to make decisions. Becky talked about core values. Like, that's what we share. you have core values that make you individual, who you are. For me, you all know this: faith, fun, and creativity. I don't do any of those things or anything without those 3 core values. And then I listen to my gut, my intuition, my spirit. And those 2 things line up. I always make the best decision for myself. But when they don't, I don't make the best decision for myself, and it's not the best decision for anybody else around me, right? So that is what I wanted to share with you today. And I know that, like I said, it's tough right now, and it's a scary world, but that's just because it's change and we're uncomfortable and we're not used to it. But if you listen to your spirit, if you listen to your intuition, you will always make the right decision. And guess what? Everything's going to be all right. Thank you.
At 46, Paty began using meth, resulting in years of addiction, arrests, and federal prison. After experiencing loneliness and despair, including a near suicide, she has now been clean for over 3 years. Working at a doggy daycare, Paty finds healing in caring for animals and shares her story to highlight the connection between loneliness and addiction, inspiring others that hope and healing are possible. I want to welcome Paty. Hi, Paty.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. You got this, Paty.
So, Paty is very special to me. Paty is one of the first people who wrote her story while I interviewed her and put her story on the website. And to this day, it's been one of the most powerful interviews that I've ever done. And so, I'm gonna let you start off with a little bit about that interview and your story, and then I have a few questions for you. So.
Can you hear me from here? Okay. I'm kind of shy. And this has been one of those weeks, so I'm sorry if I'm in between moving and I couldn't find my hairbrush. It's lucky I had one in my purse, or my hair would be out to here. So
You look beautiful.
anyway, I was born to a mother that she was an addict. And for the first, I don't know how many years of my life, I spent it alone because she always had to be in a room that was dark because she had migraines or something was always going on. My dad, which started off, he was in the Air Force, and he always worked in the medical field, and so he really helped with her addiction. If he did not bring what she needed home, she would tear the house up. So this went on till I was 13. I wasn't allowed to go outside because my mom would have panic attacks trying to worry about where I was at. So it was me and my dog for years. And my teacher, when I was 13, talked her into letting me go to what they call the fall festival, which was like a dance and little booths and stuff. So I went early to the school to help set it up. And all of a sudden, here comes the police. And they said, you need to go home, there's been a fire. And I went home, we pulled up, the house was on fire, and my dad was standing there, and my mom and my dog died in the fire. But she was so weak because she was an addict. They showed where her handprints was on the wall trying to get out, but she was so weak she couldn't get the door open. And they found my dog laying next to her. And my dog was my family, and as it went on, I said, I would never in my life do drugs. There's no way I was going to be like my mom. I thought an addict was the worst thing in the world. And my dad remarried. So I've already got abandonment issues. I hate change. Oh, I hate change. I have to tell you about that here in a minute. Change is bad for me. In fact, I end up in the process of moving, and this is not the first time I'm paying rent in 2 places because I can't decide which place I want to stay at night till I can get over to the new place. It's just been an awful thing. So anyway, back to this addiction thing. I wouldn't let anybody in my yard, my house, this was after I got older, that did drugs, drank. I'm just so anti-drug. And for a female in the state of Montana, I was working a great job. I had just bought a house and had everything I wanted except for I was fat, or I thought I was fat. Well, I was. Yeah. Well, we had this contest going on at work, and for every 5 pounds that we'd lose, there was 4 or 5 of us. For every 5 pounds that we would lose, our boss would give us money to go buy new clothes. And they were losing all this weight because we were doing Weight Watchers, we were doing everything. Well, a friend of mine talked to me into trying meth. And I didn't want to do it. And I'm one of those people, let me tell you, you talk me into doing anything because I'm codependent. So I tried it with her, and I felt like I lost 60 pounds the first week. Of course I didn't, but that's what it felt like. Because I was up for the whole week, didn't eat, running around like a crazy person, and I liked it. And my husband at the time, he had been an addict, and he had been an alcoholic, but he had stopped all that. And his family was still doing drugs, and I talked him into doing some meth with me. So I pretty much got him hooked on it, and it was rough.
You want to pause here and take a breath for a second? Okay. So, when Paty and I when I first heard the story from Paty, I remember resonating so much with you because I had a very similar childhood and also said I would never do any of those things and I would never be my mother, and it felt like I was sitting across from a version of me in a different reality. And I remember you telling me how you started on this path, and I was just floored that you were in your 40s. Like,
46.
For me, I always thought, oh, I'm safe now. Like, I'm in my 40s, I'm good. And then I sat across from you and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like Becky said earlier about we think we have it all together and maybe we don't, right?
We don't.
And so now you talked about kind of how you were in the spiral and you got your husband involved. Do you want to tell everybody what happened that was your moment of like, something's got to give and change?
To tell you the truth, I don't even know if I'm married still.
She said that to me too, Anita. It's confusing.
I haven't seen him since 2006, and I ended up going to prison because not only did I have a habit, I started selling to feed my habit. And then I really liked the money. I don't know if I like the money as much as I like the excitement. And I had a lot of people that were selling for me. And
It wasn't lonely, was it?
wasn't lonely. My biggest problem with wanting to quit drugs was I was afraid I was going to be alone. Because as long as you have drugs, you have friends. And I went to prison, and I had a 10-year sentence. I did 8.5 years on it inside the federal penitentiary. I got out, and it was right in the middle of COVID, and I was so thankful I had a good friend that let me come stay with her. And, you know, it was supposed to have only been for a month, I didn't want to leave. But, you know, she wanted her space. She was so great. She took me in when I didn't have nowhere to go. Well, then I went and stayed with another friend that said she wasn't doing drugs anymore because I said I wanted to stay away from them. And when I walked in with my stuff, I had a bedroom. Walked into the kitchen and there's a spoon. And I know what the spoon is for. And I told her I didn't want to get started on it. So I'd still go in my bedroom, and then I'd hear the torch. And that's a trigger. And they were out there having fun, smoking dope, while I was sitting in this bedroom. And I did that for about 3 days, and then I said, you know what, I want to do it. I was on probation, federal probation, and you know, it was pretty strict. And 17 dirty UAs later, I got sent back to prison. And my whole motto at that time was, look, I'm a drug addict, or I'm not a drug addict, I'm a drug dealer. I could not believe I was an addict. There was no way in the world I was going to be like my mother. Well, after going back to prison 3 times, I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm getting too old for this. And one thing that you have to learn, new playgrounds, new playmates, because it doesn't matter. You go back to those old friends, and you're going to do it. And so to this day, I know, I've got friends that, well, I don't know, they were probably not friends, because I had dope at that time. I always had dope, and then I always had friends. Well, when I went back to prison that last time, I said, look, you just need to keep me here. I don't like change. Let me just finish my time out here. Well, they sent me to Passages. Got to Passages, didn't know what I was going to do, and I applied for a job at the best place in the world. And at that time, I was still a crying, whining, big baby. I ruined my life. I didn't have nowhere to go. But I started working at the best place in the world, best boss in the world. And she let me pretty much do what I wanted to do. I went out and I got to play with my puppies. And I would cry with my puppies because I do doggy daycare at Paws and Claws. She let me sit there and cry with them puppies. And I did that for probably about 4 months. I thought I was alone, but the people that worked there also were so supportive. And new playmates. And they were so giving. And my boss is so giving. And I get so frustrated sometimes, and then I say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And then I go into work, and my boss has these angel wings.
She does.
When I walk in, I see her, I see the wings, I see the halo, the big smile. I just walk on through, I head out to my puppies. My puppies are just whining for me to hurry up and get in the yard. And I get in there, and they want love. They don't want nothing else from me. And this is my life now. Like I said, I have a little problem with change. When I was at Passages, I told them that, can I just stay here? And they said no. I went to a sober living house.
And stayed there how long? Voluntarily.
Voluntarily. I didn't have to go, but there was all that support there. I went. I was there for almost 2 years. Then a friend of mine wanted me to move in. So, of course, I was paying for the sober living house. I was paying for rent at that house because I'm not real good with change. But my life is so different now, and I know I'm not alone. I go to my AA meetings. I go to my NA meetings. I go to my Resilient Story events. I joined this club. I just call it the Old Women's Club because it's a bunch of us. But, you know, I love it, and I'm so happy now.
We're so happy for you too. We love you. What is one thing you want everybody to take away from your story? And there's so much more to Paty's story that you guys should go read it because we didn't get to a lot of the really interesting parts. But what's one thing you want people to take away?
You know, I always refer to myself in the past as, you know, when I was a person, before I started doing drugs. I was a person. I had a home. I had a perfect job. My husband pretty much did everything I asked him to do. You know, I was a person back then, and then I went through this period of time, and I tell you, half of it I can't remember. I have people that tell me things that I did, like putting people in the trunk because they didn't pay their bill.
I can't imagine it.
I was not a nice person at that period of time, and I don't remember a lot of it. But people can change, and I've got 3.5 years clean now. I try to tell my story as much as possible. I start going into passages to do AA meetings. I'm not ready to go into the jail or the prison to do meetings because they do lock that door behind you. And I ain't ready for that. And I had 5 more years of federal probation because I kept screwing up. But because of what I've done, I'm off federal probation. I'm a person again. So it can happen, and I know that. And I am so thankful for the people that are in my life now.
Thank you for you too.
Thank you. That's it.
So we are welcoming Mr. Diem Jones. Diem and I have become friends over the last couple of months, and it's always so fun to read about him because he has had the most interesting life I've ever heard of. So I'll read the bio, but I'm sure it's more interesting than this. Diem Jones is a writer, poet, musician, producer, and a visionary leader whose career bridges the world of art, healing, and community. With a lifelong passion for creative expression and human connection, Diem has spent decades empowering others through storytelling and the arts. He has directed creative writing programs on 6 university campuses and earned critical acclaim for his work across books, anthologies, music videos, documentaries, and films. Welcome, Diem Jones.
So Melanie stole my line, because it's my line to say that Diem is the most interesting person I know all the time. And he shakes his head no, but I've heard your stories, and they're incredibly interesting. So when we asked you for this, I was like, I wonder what story he's going to tell. And then we met, and I learned something new about you. And so you told me you were going to tell us about your knee. Do you want to give us a little backstory to that?
Yes, but just to clear it up, I'm just another bozo looking for a token.
No. This man's hung out with Stevie Wonder in his basement. Don't let him fool you.
So stories, everybody's got a story, everybody's got a song, but this one I want to sing about my needs. And needs are something that we all need, right? We stand on them, we use them. At 16, in high school, I was pretty renowned at basketball. I led the state in rebounding. I loved to jump over taller people. That was a lot of fun, but my knees bothered me. Now, in my family, Arthur is everybody's middle name. Arthritis. So I watched my father, I watched my mother, I said, I'm not going there. But at 47, I had bone rubbing bone for 10 years. we've gone through different procedures, and the doctor said, you know, you're too young for this much pain, but you're too young for a knee replacement. And the doctor and I had become friends. We were in San Francisco. And we've done one procedure called a high tibia osteotomy. That didn't work. So now, okay, we're going to do the knee replacement. July 22nd, 2001. You know, anybody here that's had a surgery knows that the night before surgery you can't eat at 10 o'clock. 10:30 they call me, Dr. Keith just broke his ankle, so we have to postpone the surgery. So the surgery was postponed until 9/11. It was the 9/11. In San Francisco, 5:45 a.m., I'm looking at the TV monitor, seeing the towers get hit. And I was in Beirut earlier that year, so I said, what are they doing in Beirut? And I said, OMG, that's here. They wheel me off. The nurse says, Dr. Keith, we should cancel the surgery. And he said, no, I want to help the people in New York. I'm going to put that energy into Diem's knee. Let's go. So we went off. You know, you get knocked out in surgery as always. And I woke up hearing this hammering and loud rock music. I said, damn it, Kurt, don't you have any jazz? Anyway, it was the middle of the surgery. The hammering was the hammering of the prosthesis in my knee. So then, of course, it was 9/11, and I was in the hospital and felt captive, and I knew that I had to get out of there. So the next morning, I was on the floor doing sit-ups. Then they let me out that day. I had taken in advance from my publisher to write a book on knee replacements and the healing process, because within 3 weeks, within 10 days actually, I had 120 degrees flexation. I was doing all this ridiculous stuff that you weren't supposed to do, but I can tell you right now, I'm sorry guys, men can be stupid. This a thing called machismo, which is like, it doesn't hurt, I don't cry, all that crap. Well, there I was driving within 10 days. Did I need to? No, but I did. And then 6 months, I'd written the first 2 chapters of the book, and lo and behold, the other foot collapsed. And I said, I can't write this book about a good knee when the foot's bad. You know, going to the foot podiatrist, and he said, well, you know who I am. I am the only, I'm one of 2 physicians licensed to replace ankles west of the Mississippi. I'm like, oh, that's who you are. That's really great to know. So anyway, we did a couple of things with the foot. Like 2005, we had to do a revision on the right knee. And that worked. The revision, basically, if you don't know it, it's a piece of plastic they put in between the 2 metal parts, and that replaces your cartilage. So by 2007, the other knee started doing what I say, talking. Yeah. And you know, you do all the procedures before that, and you say, okay, we're going to replace the knee. Well, lo and behold, this knee. So the prostheses on the knee had a little shaft about this big, and they hammered it. They hammered in with a little bit of hot glue on the tip. Well, that was making microfractures. So after 6 months, it would get loose. They'd have to pull it out and put it in another one. I went through that 4 times. So that little 3/4 of an inch shaft turned into 13 inches. But we finally got it to work because I was the guinea pig. The last time around, I said, look, if this doesn't work, we're going to go back in time and call you Paty. Really didn't want to hear that, but that's what I was told. In hip replacement, there's something called tantalum mesh. But they've never used it in knees before me, where it bonds the metal and the bone without glue. But 90 days for this hard-headed male of no weight bearing. That was the hardest time in my life. But something told me that if I didn't do this, I'd have to pay the consequences. So 4 times total replacement. Unfortunately, the last replacement on the left knee was 2011. The last revision on the right knee was 205. Well, these things only last 10 to 15 years. So as I stand here smiling now, guess what I'm doing this afternoon? Going to the orthopod talking about a revision. But the reality of the matter is that, I was determined. I mean, I would leave. I worked in the recording industry for many years. I would go to a recording session because in Los Angeles, I had a acupuncture practice, and many people called me Dr. Wu. Long story. You know what?
You just have such cool stories.
A tail ain't nothing but a booty, and a booty ain't nothing but a slut. We all have
I hear this one a lot. You tell me that one often.
So, basically, I was determined. My wife's a dancer. Some of you all may know her. Dr. Carol Penn was here earlier. And I said, I'm going to dance with my wife. And I was determined to do that, determined not to let any of this stop me. I know you talk about resilience. That's the name of the company. Do you ever use brilliance? Because to be resilient, you have to be brilliant. You have to get over your own ego, get over your own self to really resolve, to really be resilient. That's what I think. And, I learned a lot in the process. I learned how to, because pain is something that's actually good for you. Believe you me, pain tells you not to hurt yourself. That's why taking away pain is so dangerous, because you can then really hurt yourself because you don't feel anything. So I've learned a lot about pain management. And happy to be able to do all that I can do today. Grateful. Life is nothing but service, and you can serve if you can't walk, but I'm glad to be able to walk. If that means the miles just be turned into steps. That's my knees.
Thank you. Thank you for telling us your new story.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I'm always honored to have you tell your stories anywhere I go. So what is one thing you want everybody to take away from? You said that the time you had to be off the knee was the hardest of your life. We've got just a couple minutes left. Let's kind of talk about what was really hard for you during those times and what you'd like people to know.
I just think having to change lifestyle, not being able to, there's a picture of me in my high school yearbook with me hitting my head in the rim. I used to jump. Not being able to do a lot of the things that I used to do. Getting over that. I think we all, those of us who have gray hair, get to the point of, I'm not 21 anymore, I can't do that. But I think that the biggest thing about healing, about the world, healing itself, I think, is about any dis-ease that you have, it's got to be 50% mental. So it's a mindset. If you want to be sick, it's like anybody here take off work call themselves sick and they weren't sick, then they got sick. So we can talk ourselves into things, and also we can talk our ways out of things. I think that I would just like to leave people with the words that you can. In gymnastics, they say your body follows the head, where your body also follows the mind. So it's your mindset that will lead you to your goals, and altering it as need be, not being afraid to, not being being the odd guy in the locker room. So what? You got to be happy with this person, and that's the inner one. So you asked me for one thing to leave. That was it. That's one thing.
Well, I think that was a great thing to leave on, so I'm gonna